Hi, I'm Ian Preston, and welcome to another episode of the Fingal's Cave podcast. Today we have another fascinating guest, Ron Fleischer. Ron is one of the most experienced and best connected Pink Floyd specialists. He is the founder and driving force behind the Harvested label, and a veteran of nearly 50 years of Pink Floyd and Floyd-related concerts starting in 1977. All of this and more coming up. Over to our host, Niels Senfenig.
So, hi Ron, it's great to have you on the show. How are you?
I'm good, Nils. Nice to see you.
Yeah, so you're in Chicago, as I see. 5 o'clock p.m. on your side?
Just about.
Yeah, it's midnight here, so it will be a long night, hopefully, and I'm really looking forward to have a chat with you.
Well, hopefully I
Really
won't
nice to
bore
have
you.
you.
Hopefully I won't bore you and put you to sleep.
Maybe I just will no, it won't happen. It won't happen. All good. So, as you may know from the earlier episodes we have, the first most important question for all of us is, how did you get in touch with Pink Floyd the first way? How did you what at what age were have you been?
So I've been thinking about this, and it's a really fond memory. I must have been about 15 years old, which would put this in 1975, shortly after Wish You Were Here was released. And my best friend at the time, who's still my best friend, Greg, he and I were really big music fans, and we would borrow each other's records. And he had Wish You Were Here. And he said, "You got to check this out. You should listen to it." And at the time, there was a group called Chicago, from Chicago, right? And they had a big hit on the radio called Wishing You Were Here. And that's what I thought I was going to be listening to. So it came at a great surprise when I dropped the needle down and heard Shine On You Crazy Diamond for the first time. It was like I don't think we're in Kansas anymore. I don't think this is Chicago. And so that's how I first discovered Pink Floyd. And I'm classically trained. I grew up listening to classical music and Broadway shows and whatever was on the radio. But in all through my school years, through the end of high school, I played in bands and orchestras, everything from a marching band on a football field to wearing a tuxedo and performing in statewide competitions. And so I know how to read, write, and transpose music. And the thing that struck me about listening to Wish You Were Here, especially songs like Shine On, and I say songs because what struck me was this isn't like your normal 4 or 5 minute pop song. This is structured more like a classical composition. And I think that's one of the aspects that really drew me into Pink Floyd, that it was that a little bit more thought went into the construction of the material than your average, 3 or 4 minute pop song. So that was my first time hearing Pink Floyd. And and we loved it. We got a little bit obsessed with it. We used to go out to the record store every week or every other week, and he would buy a Pink Floyd record, and I would buy a Pink Floyd record, and we'd record them on cassettes, and we'd trade them and all that. The first record that he bought after Wish You Were Here was Dark Side of the Moon. The first record I bought was Ummagumma. And I'm not a fan of Ummagumma. It's probably my least favorite album in the Pink Floyd canon. So it was a little bit strange and hard to get into, even though I really did love the live material. But we used to listen to Dark Side of the Moon in Greg's room. That was our world at the time. When you're 15, 16 years old, you don't have a house or anything like that, or even
Yeah.
an apartment. We had our bedrooms. We used to listen to Dark Side of the Moon in the dark. And every time time kicked off with those bells chiming, all the alarms going off, if we used to jump, we always used to get startled. It took us, for the longest time, it took us to get past being startled by the opening of time. So that's basically where it started, probably in late 1975.
Yeah, it started for me. It started a little bit later. I think I might be a little bit younger than you, not much, but a little bit. And it was also about Darks of the Moon, Animals, and Wish You Were Here. And as I told before, it was something very different.
Hmm.
The first vinyl I bought or I got as a present was Relics, and I remember being, maybe as close as you have been disappointed a little bit about Amagama. I was a little bit like, okay, that's not the Pink Floyd I know. That's not the whole conceptual thing, but it's just a sampler. I learned to like it later on, but I remember being like 12 years old. Relics was more like, yeah, okay. So, when did you start listening to the live bootlegs, live shows? Or was it quite early, or did it come in later?
Well, here's how it happened. If you want to go chronologically, one day Greg and I were at a record store, and in the window there was a handwritten poster saying that new Pink Floyd Animals coming out February, whatever it was, right? And so that was our first new release, and we were so excited. We were counting down the days to it, and we really loved Animals, even though it was a great departure, obviously, from Wish You Were Here. And in '77, I was 17. Greg was 15 years old, and we and we wanted to see Pink Floyd when they came to Miami in 1977. It was the first stop on the Animals tour, but Greg was too young to go. The only way that we can go, that we were allowed to go, was if his older sister took us to the show. So his older sister Meredith and her boyfriend ended us taking us to Miami baseball stadium, and I still have the ticket
Wow,
stub
yeah,
from. I love the price. Look at that.
yeah,
The
10.
Yeah,
Is
no,
it?
the state tax pushed the
Yeah,
price into double digits.
yeah.
And so it was an amazing experience. And shortly after that, um, and if you want to talk a little bit more about the show after, we can backtrack. But again, we would go to our record haunts every week, the same discount records, and there was a few other places I can't even remember the names of now. And I still have muscle memory from flipping through records in the record bins, right?
Yeah.
And so, usually we're flipping through the records. Oh, there's Relics. Oh, here's an Australian version of Relics. And why does this cover look different? And all of a sudden, I see this very nondescript album, and it's black and white, has a big white border around it, and it says Pink Floyd Knobs. And well, what the heck is this? And there's a sticker on it that says import, no returns. So you buy it, you can't
A nice
return
way
it,
of
right?
putting it.
And so I was really excited. I thought, wow, they put out a live recording from the Animals tour. And I got home and put it on, and it was from the, I believe, Empire Pool show, right? From Empire
Yeah,
Pool Wembley
yeah.
show. And the sound quality was lacking, to say the
Hmm.
least. And I was at a loss. I didn't understand what I was listening to. Now, it was really interesting to listen to it because both Greg and I appreciated the differences between the live performance and the album, right? So
Hmm.
there are distinct differences there. So that was pretty cool. But the next time I went back to Discount Records, I went up to the counter because, they knew us. We were regular customers. I'm like, what's the deal with this record?
Hmm.
And he said, it's a bootleg. I'm like, what's a bootleg? And he said, well, it's non-official recordings. They're recorded, by people in the audience and pressed on vinyl and put out in limited edition. I'm like, you're kidding me. These things exist. And so I kind of was like a little bit on the lookout for them. And if you've seen the original Miles book on Pink Floyd, the Barry Miles book, in the back of the book it had a discography of not only the official releases, but it had a bunch of bootlegs in the back of it. And I was like, so that was kind of like a treasure map to me. It was like, wow, I
I
gotta
got
hunt
another
these.
one here.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh,
let's
Andre, yeah, I
from the
have that
other
one
one.
too. Yeah. And so it was like, okay, we have to do some detective work. We have to find these things. And I literally took out the yellow pages and I called every record store within about an hour's drive. I was living in North Miami Beach at the time. And I would call them and I would say, hi, do you sell imports? And they say, what do you mean? I go, well, like imports, like unofficial recordings. I didn't want to say bootlegs. And they would even say no, and or they would say, oh yeah, we sell bootlegs. And so I'll never forget one time I went to this store in West Palm Beach called Bananas, and it was like a record shop slash head shop, right? The place reeked. And I went in there, and it was a carpeted store. And in front of the front counter on the floor, standing up against the counter, laid all across the floor, were nothing but bootlegs. I saw like Raving and Drooling and Oh My God and just all of these really famous bootlegs, most of that I've heard of and some I've never heard of. And it's like I don't have enough money to buy like one. And so that's what we started doing. We started to collect bootleg records, and it became the disappointment was not only in the sound quality of some of them, the disappointment was in the repetition of spending money on a bootleg and then realizing, oh, I already have this recording on another bootleg
Yeah,
already. I
yeah.
wish I knew that. I would have saved my money because I wasn't into the whole um, like collecting thing where I had to have everything, right? I wasn't a completist. I was just really looking for the best sounding recording to represent each tour. And so, I used to visit my dad who lived in New York and go to Greenwich Village, which had some great record stores with tons of bootlegs there. And that's how I got started with listening to live recordings. They were all through bootlegs. And then not too not too long after that, I discovered Goldmine magazine. That was a record collector's magazine, right? And in the back there would be classified ads, and there were ads from people who were looking to trade. And I think that's how I met a lot of my friends that I'm still friends with. I think that's might have been how I met Doug Hext. I think that's how I
So
met
we're
Vernon
talking
Vitch.
about cassettes now.
Yeah, they were
Yeah.
trading cassettes, right? So we went from vinyl to cassettes, and then people like Vernon would send me his famous Pink Floyd archives list that had all
Yeah.
these recordings and the timings and quality ratings, which were greatly appreciated. And Vernon and I started trading, and after a while, we just became really good friends and just started sending each other stuff. I would just send him stuff without asking for anything in return, and every now and then I'd ask him for a recording, and he'd send it to me. And it was really nice back in the day. It became a very it was very personal. Now, you click on a link and you download it. Back then, you had to find the person, you had to literally write them a letter
Mm.
introducing yourself and talking a little bit about yourself and sending them a list of everything that you had
Earning their
and
trust.
and and sending something in the mail and then
Yeah.
waiting and waiting for them to get it and then waiting for the response and setting up the trade. So it was a great way to meet people and make a lot of friends. And those friendships have lasted so many years. I think Nino Gotti was
Hmm.
someone I traded with back in the 80s as well.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it was. I was a little bit later, and so I was on the CD bootleg side, and it all started in the flea markets in Germany, and I had the same problems. I mean, limited amount of money, but unlimited amount of bootlegs at that time, and they had a little tape deck or a CD deck with a crappy headphone where you could listen to it like 20 seconds and to decide if it's great or not. And there were many times I bought them, and at home I realized, oh God, I got a already much better version of it at home in my collection. But yeah, it was a great time, and I had, in the days I had like 800 CDs or something. I sold them all, unfortunately. But what at that time and even now, I would be interested in. What was the most important thing for you on a bootleg? Was it more the quality or the show itself, or even the documentarial part, the historical part of it?
At the time, I think it was really based on the quality. Like I
Mm,
said, I was trying to find the best quality recording representing each tour because it
mm,
became fairly obvious after getting into the recordings that Pink Floyd really didn't change up their set lists too much, right? So it's not like Grateful Dead shows or other shows where they're changing things around a lot. So if I could just find like the best quality recording from the tour. Like I remember my friend sending me a copy of the album Pigs, Wishes and Moons when he was in
hmm.
college. He bought it and mailed it to me, and that was the Boston Garden 1975 show. And I was blown away by the quality of that
Yeah.
recording, even though it was an incomplete show on two records at the time. So I think for me, it was about quality, even though some of them had really pretty covers that really interested me. Um, if if I didn't, if I had something from that tour already that I thought was really good quality, I'd really shy away from it. There were some bootlegs that were like really famous or infamous, if you will, like Oh My God. It's like, okay, I got to
Mm,
see what that's all about, and
mm.
try to track those down. And and a few others. But yeah,
I mean, yeah, it's the same for me. If the quality is not good, I don't like to listen to it. I mean, if the quality is bad, but it's a very interesting recording or show, for historical reason, I listen to it, but not on a regular basis. I mean, unfortunately, it's almost the same bootlegs I'm listening to every single time from each year or whatever, because there are some outstanding recordings there. I mean, from some years more, some from some years less. But so moving on to your live experiences. I mean, you sent me a list up front with all these shows, the Pink Floyd related shows you attended, and we're counting to close to 50 shows. I mean, you will have that 50 shows in the pocket, I think, quite soon, and it's a fascinating list and very exciting. And as you wrote your the Miami show, and you briefly already told me, was your first show, your first Pink Floyd show you attended?
that was
Um,
actually the very first rock concert that I ever
yeah,
attended, and
yeah,
that was a very interesting experience, that live show, because um, it was a little intimidating. The crowd was pretty rowdy.
yeah,
This was but it was like a South Florida show. I was a New Yorker. I've only been living there for 2 or 3 years at a time, and I'm going to use the following word with affection. There were a lot of rednecks at the show, right? I
yeah,
had a lot of friends that were rednecks too,
yeah,
and they tend to get drunk and rowdy and stuff. And sure, there was a lot of, we when we got there, we didn't want to go onto the field. We heard that we heard rumors that there was going to be a riot on the field or something like that,
yeah,
which I don't know where that came from. It never happened. But so we took our seats kind of towards the back of the bowl because we wanted to be able to sit and watch the show. I was pretty short at the time. I'm not much taller now, and I didn't want to stand in a crowd and just try to had a struggle to see over people's heads. So we
yeah,
had really good. We had pretty decent good seats, but yeah, you could hear people all around us, saying sit down," because people were just
yeah,
standing up, and so yeah, there was a lot of that going on. But you could tell that there was a bit of anxiety going on with the stage crew too. There were some things that didn't seem right. Like for instance, the big inflatable pig, was out there the entire time, strung up on a
okay,
flagpole and flapping around the breeze like a stadium flag. So
okay,
it wasn't inflated. There was a
yeah,
deflated pig, but it was up there the whole time. And there was no screen. There was no circular screen. And we saw them trying to. In fact, I think during halftime, we literally saw the crew marching with the screen and trying to set it up. But I think it was just too windy that day. I think it was really the wind
yeah.
that was preventing it from being put up. And so I think Roger even says something at the end of the show like, "Sorry, we couldn't put up the screen for you to see all of our lovely images, our lovely pictures, but fuck it."
I don't know if you have been able to listen to the two episodes with the Chris Cochran and also David Fiddler. David Fiddler was the surround guy. He
Oh
was
yeah, that's right.
responsible
Yeah.
for the stacks on the back, and he told some interesting stories also about the crowd being very rowdy and police being there. As you say, I mean, at some stages he thought it might be a riot. It was so aggressive. But interesting that Chris Cochran did not mention the problems they had in Miami. All I know is that they did some technical rehearsals between the European and the US shows, but they were running out of time. So
Yeah, and this was opening night of the tour too.
yeah,
And to be fair, there was no physical aggression at all. It was all verbal.
hmm,
There was no. I didn't see anybody pushing around
yeah,
outside the show and buying merchandise and stuff. Everybody was cool. Everything was very cool. It was nothing. My fears weren't realized, and everything was very cool. The funny thing is that before the show, Greg and I were going through that set list in our head. Like, what are they going to play? Oh, they're going to play a song from this album. They're going to play a song from that album and all that. We had, there was no internet. We didn't know what Pink Floyd's MO was at the time. Well, we're going to play one album for the first half and then the previous album for the
yeah,
second half. And we slowly came to that realization
yeah. It's
as the
still
show progressed.
strange,
It's
I
like, oh,
think,
I guess we're
but
going to hear Animal. Oh, okay, I guess we're going to hear the Wish You Were Here album now.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, there are three great recordings of that show. One is a very spectacular recording, recorder one, I would say, is the best one. But even there, I mean, the music is great and everything, but the it's really annoying. The sit the fuck down, they were crying all through the recording, which is really sad because it's wonderful.
Well,
But
well,
recorder three is also good and has less annoyance there.
people near me were yelling out "Suey, Suey," which was like a pig call. So
Ah, okay.
that's the Southerners, I guess. But yeah, they were all yelling out "Suey, Suey."
So, but you were again then in Madison Square Garden, second time in July?
Yes, the second time was in July at
Yeah.
Madison Square Garden. A little bit more expensive ticket, $10
Yeah, I
and
see.
50 cents, right? So, hey, you know what? I had spent over $20 on Pink Floyd tickets that year.
Yeah.
Now,
Unbelievable.
New York was an interesting show because I was visiting my dad at the time in New York. I often came back to New York, especially in summers, and one of my good friends there, Alan, was actually a scalper. And so yeah, he had a bunch of tickets he was selling in front of the garden, Madison Square
Okay.
Garden. And he had me hold on to the tickets while he made the deals in case he got busted. They couldn't find any tickets on him, right? That's what he figured anyway. But that never happened. We sold the tickets. We ended up with these great loge seats. And the difference between the Miami show and the New York show were like night and day because New York was in Madison Square Garden. Miami Baseball Stadium must have had 50,000, maybe 60,000 people in it, right? Madison Square Garden, actually an intimate venue compared to a lot of indoor
Yeah.
stadiums these days. It's not really that big. And being indoors, it's a controlled environment. You didn't have to worry about the
Yeah.
weather or the wind or anything like that. And it was the first time, it's like got to see the screen.
Yeah.
I got to see what I missed, and I was like, oh my God. And me at the time, I've always been into animation, and to see some of Gerald Scarf's work there and
Yeah.
the visual interpretations of some of the songs on the
And
screen
it
were
was
just
dark
like,
from the beginning because it
yeah,
was
yeah, and it was
inside.
dark from the beginning, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was there was also a groundbreaking night for me because there was somebody passing a bowl of, I'm not sure what it was, hashish or marijuana or whatever. Everyone, the whole place was lit, and I did my first few draws on and on a pipe, I think the first time in my life, and I got really stoned. And so the evening was greatly enhanced for me, to say the least, especially the second half, because I remember it really kicked in during the intermission, and I was freaking out a little bit. And Alan said, "Well, why don't you go get something to eat? It'll calm you down." I remember buying an ice cream sandwich, and I remember thinking, "This is the best ice cream sandwich I ever
You got
had."
enhanced.
I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that. And after that, when they came back and did "Wish You Were Here," it was all just really amazing. And yeah, and unlike Miami, where we were maybe sitting a city block away in the stadium because we were so far back at Madison Square Garden, you could see the whites of their eyes.
Yeah, great. And technically, I mean, they're really developed, and it was just perfect show. I mean, the we are luckily we got another perfect recording of that one. I would say even one of the very best, at least for the second half.
Yeah.
It's when did you get in touch with that recording? Did it take a long time until it surfaced for you?
Yes, it did. Oh God, yeah. Oh my God. I think the first time I ever, boy, I'm not sure, but I think it could have been the first time I ever heard that recording was on a bootleg called "Caught in a Crossfire," which
Yeah,
and it was a single CD, so it only had portions of the show. So it wasn't
yeah, only
until,
second half, I guess,
yeah,
without
it wasn't
the
until years later that the entire
chorus.
show
Yeah,
surfaced, and then and decades later until the masters came out, and the whole story behind it, how the taper actually changed his seats during
yeah,
halftime. That's why the second half
yeah.
sounds so good. And if I may just take a minute here to say a big thank you to anyone who has ever recorded a show.
Yes,
Because that's a huge sacrifice. People don't realize, oh, they just go in, you set up, you just record, and that's it. No, because there's a lot of anxiety in there, right? You got to they had to sneak their equipment in. Not that I'm condoning any of this, but they had to
yeah,
sneak their equipment in. They had to set up. They had to get the recording levels right, and all the while they had to do it covertly to make sure that they didn't get caught. And this was a sacrifice because they didn't get to enjoy the shows as much as we did
Yeah,
because they were, I'm sure, busy always checking things and just look on the lookout for security or whatever.
yeah,
So a big thank you out there for people who recorded all of these shows for us. You know what I loved about bootlegs? It was it allowed me it was like a time machine. It allowed me to experience shows that I was either too young, too poor, or it was geographically impossible to get to at the
yeah.
time, right? And so they were historical documents of the band. And so thank you to everyone who's ever recorded shows and shared freely.
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, it must be really stressful. I mean, there's one of these very famous recordings from Boston '77 where they have the Lampinski and where they have the who was the other fantastic guy?
Yeah,
Hopkins.
yeah,
Uh,
Hoskins, yeah, and
and
Lempinski.
there's like 7 minutes missing in Shiny and the Crazy Diamond 6 to 9, and then now 1 or 2 years ago, another recorder surfaced, recorder three, and this recorder has the whole action on tape. So take out the batteries and the guy yelling to whoever, but it might even be have been Hopkins. I don't know, but he's still recording, and as you say, it must have been a thrill. I mean, it's unbelievable. And there's so many fantastic recordings out there, not just from '77, but from like '67 on. It's unbelievable. Like, we can be most thankful. And we come back to that later because
Okay.
you took an important part in remastering and putting out all these recordings. So, um, but coming back to 1977 in general, I mean, the Madison Square Garden show, and it's as you say. I mean, you had you had been there, which is wonderful, but even not being there, but all these bootlegs I'm listening to today put me back in the time when I first got them and the time in my life when I realized and got it, like Oakland '77, like Brutish Temptation, the bootleg from the Pepperland, which is these bootlegs are the bootlegs I list most because they create emotion and remember me of a certain time in my life. And I think it must be even much more of that being there at the show. So what's happening if you're listening to the Madison Square Garden '77? I mean, it must be so strange to have a bootleg in that quality and knowing I was there listening to that in real time.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think that over time that aspect of listening to the recordings have worn off. Now especially because I don't listen to anything on physical media anymore.
Mm.
So I'm literally just playing the recording. And so actually thinking about being there for that show when I listened to the Madison Square Garden show, I can't think the last time I thought of like, yeah, I was there. It brings back memories of being there. I think now I just listen to it and appreciate it for what it is. And I think that the nostalgia has waned a bit, which thinking about it now makes me kind of sad.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's both. It's first, I think how must it have been there being there. I mean, there's one famous recording from New York in 1970 where the two guys are talking with a girl, chattering through the whole concert and just saying, "Yeah, what if we put that recording somewhere in the attic and it will be like a time thing, and then they will have it in 50 years." And exactly that happened, and it's so exciting. I mean, um yeah, it's a wonderful, the historical part of it. I love it. I just love it. So you already mentioned it, but talking about the Animals tour, and we had like Chris Cochran there telling us some stories, David Fiddler, which was most interesting, and I hope we get even some more just talking about that tour because I think it's a very special tour in many ways. And how do you reflect on the Animals tour at that time, being like 17 years old, being there?
It was, first of all, after the Miami show, it was like uh, it was like an epiphany. It was just, I remember telling, and when we got back, you know, where we live, we have a bunch of friends hanging out in the playground or the basketball courts, and telling everybody about the show. Oh my God, you should have seen there were the two cranes with sparks that came up, and there was a pig that got inflated, and there were all the inflatable people, and it was just an amazing experience. I knew that that words couldn't convey what I had seen, and after the New York show, that just amplified it. But it was the 70s. It was the late 70s, and shows started to get rowdier. And the performance itself, I thought, was a lot more caustic than I expected.
Hmm.
There was a lot more bite to it. There
Hmm.
was a little bit of anger in the performance. I mean, Animals is an angry album
Yeah.
to begin with, but I think that bled into the Wish You Were Here second set as well. You could hear it in their playing that, it just was more of a, um, I don't know, it was tighter, but it was also uh, it was tight yet rough, not rough, a little rough around the edges, right?
Yeah, and
And
raw
just a little bit,
and
yeah, a
aggressive.
little
Yeah,
bit,
it was.
just a little bit of an angrier from a musical and performance standpoint. Not that the band was angry, even though they probably were pissed at the fans as the tour progressed, as you could hear from Roger's displeasure. And especially, oh my God, when that go back to the Madison Square Garden show, right? These assholes were lighting off firecrackers throughout
Yeah.
the show. And they're lighting us off on the main floor. Again, we're sitting in the loge and we could see the sparks in the seats going off, right? But at one point during Pigs, somebody lit off an M80, right? That's like a miniature bomb. It's like a quarter stick of dynamite or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, you can hear that.
And my heart just leapt out of my chest.
Yeah.
I mean, and everybody freaked out and everyone just started booing after that. I hope they beat the shit out of whoever did
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what was happening in the 77 shows. Things were just getting, out of hand a little bit, and I think the band was reacting to that in their performances.
Yeah, it gotten worse and worse. I would say Oakland in May was still okay, I would say. They were not too angry about everything, but then later on they got really angry and Roger Waters got really pissed. I think even David Gilmour wasn't too annoyed about all that, but Roger really was. I mean, Montreal in the end, we don't have to talk about that anymore. I mean, it's most obvious what happened there.
Yeah.
So then they went back to the studios and recorded The Wall, and you were there in New York, Nassau Coliseum.
Yeah, let me just tell you about The Wall just very quickly, how I discovered it for the first time.
Yeah,
So Greg and I, we went to these record stores every week, right? And one of the stores we went to was Vibrations. And at the front of the store in Vibrations, they had the new releases out. They were all spread out. Like there were two rows of new releases. They were literally like one of them was a row on the floor and the other one slightly above it. And we always scanned all the new releases. And we're looking across everything. Didn't see anything that really, caught our attention. And so I went through the store doing my business, doing my muscle memory, flipping through all of the albums. And then I hear Greg call to me from the other end of the store. He yells out, Ronald, which I went by back in the day. And I just looked up and very dramatically, he went like this. And he held up the Wall album. And I didn't know what the hell he was holding up. And so I walked over to him and I looked at it and I still didn't know what the hell it was because I don't think that there was even a sticker on it,
yeah,
and it was just so, you know, uh, so plain and simple that when we first walked in, we just walked right past it. We didn't even know it was there. And we got so excited, but it was a double album. We didn't have enough money to buy it each. So we ended up
yeah,
buying the album and a cassette. So the first time we played it, we recorded it. And yeah, so that's how I first discovered the Wall. It was amazing. we had no idea that Pink Floyd was working on anything, and there was kind of like a 2 year gap in between albums since like Dark Side of the Moon, 73, 75, 77, and then 79. And there it was. And so it was a it was a last minute thing. It was a bit of a hit and run. But I think it was in New York for maybe 24 hours where I had to work, I had to do other stuff, and so I just flew in for the show. My friend Alan again got us a couple of tickets, and the next morning I was on a flight back to Miami.
Wow. Okay.
And
And
and and, and it's strange because and it's sad, but I have my memories surrounding the show are much stronger than what
uh-huh.
happened during the show itself because memory's a stranger, and because of the the videos that have surfaced from the Wall show, right? I think some of those have actually supplanted my actual memories.
Yeah.
So I can't remember. Sometimes I can't distinguish from things I actually remember and things that I actually like saw on video that helped me remember. But
Yeah.
I just remember being really struck by the enormity of the thing. This wasn't at Madison Square Garden. It was at Nassau Coliseum on Long Island, which was a bigger venue.
Yeah.
And I just was struck by the overall, like I said, enormity of it, and how much thought went into the theatrical presentation. But one thing that really blew me away more than anything was the animation again by Gerald Scarfe,
Yeah.
because I was at a point in my life where I was about 1 year away from moving to Chicago to study animation, to take that
Yeah.
big leap of faith. And so that's the only things I really remember. I mean, any other memories? Uh,
And the
like I,
music, many say that the music was so perfect that they even thought it might have been playback or something because the quality, musical wise, was just flawless.
well, I never ever got the impression that anything wasn't being played live. There were obviously some recorded sound effects, but you could see I had pretty decent seats for that, and you could see the performers. It was one of those where am I supposed to look shows. You want to watch Gilmour, you want to watch Waters, you want to watch the band, and then you got to look at everything else that's going on at the same time. So it was so overwhelming visually that sometimes you maybe weren't quite paying attention to the sonics, to the
Yeah. Okay.
performance as
Yeah, I
much as
get
you
that.
should.
Yeah.
So
And
that it's funny because I was thinking about that, and that is the one show that I have the worst memory of.
okay. So the surroundings or the show itself?
The
The
show itself.
the show itself, yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
funny. I totally get that you say that the surroundings might have been more had of an impact than the show itself because when I went to the Wall, Roger Waters, the Wall in 1990, and I told that story in another episode. The whole thing, getting there like 500 miles with a
Mm.
friend and his parents, and driving there and being at the Potsdamer Platz and everything around it, and walking from the concert at night through Checkpoint Charlie and the center of Berlin, just was stunning. And it was, in the end, it was more of an experience than the show itself. That also, there was a reason why the show was a little bit, let's say, bulky. But yeah, I totally get you on that. So,
Yeah.
but
But I'll tell you one thing. Um, the crowd was relatively mellow. I mean, it was a night and day from the '77 tour to the 1980 tour.
mhm,
Yeah,
yeah,
the the
which
cr-
is
yeah the crowd was relatively pretty calm for the show and well behaved, and no fireworks that unless the band was setting them off.
yeah. Well, I was saying there were enough fireworks on the stage. So
Yeah.
yeah, and after the Walls, things got difficult around Pink Floyd. Roger already alienated from the band, and the final cut was, I would say, a special album, and we talked about that. So they split up, and Roger started Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking, and David Gilmour About Face, and you were lucky enough to attend both tours in '84. Roger Waters and David Gilmour, and preparing for that podcast today, I listened to the recordings again the ones that are available, and it's unbelievable that, to me at least, that these two guys were in a band together at that point in '84, because it's so much. It's a spectrum you can't even believe. They're both playing money. Yes, they do, but it's a different kind of world. How did you experience that at the time?
Well, for the About Face show for Gilmour, he played the UIC Pavilion here. And I remember, back in the day, we had a lineup for tickets. Sometimes we would camp out on the sidewalk outside Ticketron was back then. Ticketron was the outlet of the day in front of Sears stores or anybody who was selling them. And for the UIC show, we actually lined up outside the venue, outside the UIC Pavilion. I was about eighth in line, and I remember eighth or tenth in line, and I remember I needed to get 8 tickets because I was the one always getting tickets for my friends, and I was there in line with my friend Greg and a different Greg, and I found out there was like a 6 ticket limit, so I needed 2 extra tickets. And when you're in line with people for hours and hours on end, you form a common bond, because you're all waiting. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but the guy in front of the line, when he found out, I needed 2 extra tickets, he said, "Well, I'm only getting 4 tickets. I'll buy you a couple." So I gave him
Right.
my money, and I ended up getting a bunch of seats in like the fourth row, but he got us 2 tickets in the first row right in front of Gilmour.
Okay.
I mean, I think that he thought that he was like he was sitting probably closer to the center of the stage, but Gilmour didn't play center stage on that tour. He was a little to the left of center.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Greg and I were like sitting right in front of him, looking up at him and just watching him play. And I remember trying to make eye contact with him for the whole show. And he very rarely looked up out at the audience. He would just mostly focus
Yeah.
on what he was playing. And it was just amazing, even though we only got two Floyd numbers, right? Run Like Hell and Money, I think.
Comfortably numb.
It didn't matter.
Yeah.
It didn't matter. He could have played anything, and
Yeah.
actually, the set list was pretty good. I still love his debut album, and About Face I really liked at the time. I loved it at the time. It's a little bit dated now, even though there are still some great songs on it. And David, if you're watching this, I really hope that you do incorporate some of the songs from those two albums into your upcoming tour, please.
Oh, that would be
Uh,
wonderful. Yeah.
and so that was just a wonderful experience. I had only sat first row for one other show before. That was in 1978 for Journey at New York
Hmm.
Palladium. Van Halen opened for them. They were a brand new band. They had just had their first album out. Ronnie Montrose was the middle act. Journey had Wheel in the Sky. And for that show, we were literally like this, leaning on the
Yeah.
stage, watching them with Eddie Van Halen doing solos, like right in our face. We passed a joint to Eddie Van Halen during that show. But anyway, I digress. Um,
So,
Seeing
sorry,
Gilmour,
sorry to
first
interrupt
row.
you, but
Yeah,
at
yeah.
that point, were you more like a Roger Waters camp, or
No,
more David
no,
Gilmour camp, or just Pink
no,
Floyd?
no.
No.
I thought that we were getting a twofer. I
Yeah.
thought we were
Okay.
I thought we were blessed to have them both on
Yeah.
tour. I didn't like one more than the other,
Okay.
and I came to understand that David's show was going to be more like musically focused, where Roger
Hmm.
was going to carry on more of the Pink Floyd tradition and make it
Hmm.
into a multimedia experience.
Hmm.
And so that was the UIC show. For Roger's show in '84, he played the Rosemont Horizon here, and that date was actually changed from the original date. I can't remember what the original dates were. I had a good friend of mine who I had traded tapes with, Richard Ashton, who flew in from the West Coast to see the show with me, and it was really really cool. We've still remained friends for 40 years, and it was. I remember trying to figure out what he was going to play, because the Pros and Cons was an interesting album. It took a while to get into. It was a little bit musically sparse. It repeated a lot of themes that he had
Yeah.
used in the past. And so I really wanted to see what he was going to do with it visually. So I was really interested in the visual aspects of what he was going to do. And in seeing the show, I think I was a little bit disappointed at the time by the visual presentation because, especially now, this is 84. I had graduated from college. I was working professionally in the animation industry,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to see some animation,
Yeah.
So, but all of the new stuff was basically like a moving slideshow with Reg
Yeah.
the dog, right? And and so it was interesting. I remember being a little disappointed that that it wasn't animated. And then there was Clapton, you
Yeah.
know, who I wasn't the biggest Clapton fan at the time. Of course, I knew who he was and respected his godlike stature. Um, but and as much as I liked it, it was almost a distraction from the show, from
Oh,
Roger's show.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Interesting
yeah.
you say that.
I hate to say that. I know people are going to hate me for saying that, but when you think about it, especially in retrospect, being there, oh my God, this is great. I loved, it was great to see Clapton, but he was such a dominating focus in the show that I think it distracted from Roger as a front man for a bit and from the whole performance. I mean, some people were just there just to see Clapton and didn't really care about Waters. I remember leaving the show with the people I went with, and they were like, "What the hell was that all about?" you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something I asked Kyle about the pros and cons of hitchhiking. He tried
And
to
then I had
explain it to
extended.
me, and he was very
Yeah.
excited about the show and everything. But yeah, Clapton is very special, and I think even Roger Waters was a little bit annoyed at a few shows. Kyle told me that, or told us that at one point Roger Waters just went off the stage. That the great Eric Clapton, and just went off and was a little, maybe he was jealous or whatever, but. Yeah, it's a very and we had a very nice discussion about it because I'm not I was a big fan of the pros and cons of hitchhiking when I was young and being a German and not getting the whole text. I explained to Kyle and Adam that I do not really get it, but they explained it to me, and it's exactly as you say. David Gilmour was focused on the music, and Roger Waters was focused on the theatrical experience about it. And what a great time it was to be able to go to both shows. I mean, to get the best of both worlds. Wonderful, just wonderful. I mean, it's
Yeah, it only took 3 years to change that dynamic. Just think about, well, I did see them the following year in 85 without Clapton. My friends from back in South Florida got some tickets at the Hollywood Sportatorium.
yeah,
Man, what a hellhole that was. And it's gone now. It's been demolished, but there were just so many great shows that I did see there. And it was interesting. It was nice to see him change the set list up. I believe he did a few more songs from the final cut, like "Get Your Filthy
correct.
Hands Off My Desert," right?
Yeah.
And Southampton Dock. I think he did the first two Brick songs with "Happiest Days" in the middle. So it was interesting to see it again, and oh, especially since I had recordings from the tour. So everything, like the way that they played money, right? I knew exactly what they were doing with the money, the syncopation of the beats and all that. I mean, it
Yeah.
was ingrained on me. So I really, really got into the music part of it back then because I was familiar. I went in very familiar with what they were going to be performing.
So when you say that you got a little bit distracted from Eric Clapton being there in '85, he was not there. Was it better for you
Yeah,
then, or
it wasn't better. It was different. I'm glad I got to see both shows. Um, I no, as I say, it's like comparing apples and oranges because you did have the great Eric Clapton. So,
mm,
there was some good with that and some, a little bit of a drawback to it. But that aspect of the show was removed in 85. And so it was really just a Roger show. And I think like I said, I think that's the way it should have been. I think it was their wives that got them together. Roger's wife with Clapton's wife said, "Hey, wouldn't it be a good idea if the boys toured together?" It's like, geez.
so that
Well, we know
actually
how.
was my second bootleg. Sorry, the first bootleg was London 1980. My father gave it to me, and my second bootleg was Roger Waters and the Bleeding Heart Band live. I think New York 1985. It was a great sound
The
and was a
Roger
great bootleg.
bootleg.
Yeah,
I think I had "Thanks for the Ride." That was the Stockholm '84
yeah, the
bootleg
double
that I
with
listened
the
to. That's what I listened to over and over again. That got
yeah.
me into not so much pros and cons, but his own take on the Floyd stuff because he tried to rearrange a lot of the songs to make them more of his own and separate them a little bit from Pink Floyd, which was cool at the time. He did that for a few years up until like 1999, till that tour where he kind of like reclaimed the Pink
Yeah,
Floyd legacy again, and
yeah.
it became less of a of a distraction for him, I guess. I guess he embraced it more.
So almost the same happened again in 1987. Pink Floyd was back, and they were in big fight with Roger Waters, of course. And Roger Waters released Radio Chaos, which was, and we spoke about that in the other episode already, a very different album and a very non-Pink Floyd album, and no drums, no guitar, just to separate him as far as possible from David Gilmour and the rest of the band. And he toured with that album in 87, just a few days. He started a few days before Pink Floyd started with a Momentary Lapse of Reason. As think the Momentary Lapse of Reason tour started in late September,
Yeah,
correct?
uh-huh. Yeah.
And Radio Chaos was early September, I think. But it was a strange
Oh,
coincidence that they did it
yeah.
almost the very same time. So
I
you
know,
saw
right?
them within weeks.
Yeah, but this was after the breakup.
Yeah,
When I saw Roger and David in 84 and 85, there was still a Pink Floyd with Roger
true,
Waters.
true.
So there was a lot of acrimony going on.
Yeah,
And I have some stories for you about those shows, right? If you're interested.
absolutely.
If the people
Shoot.
out there are interested. So let's start with Roger. Um, so I saw Roger, the first time I saw Roger in 87 for Chaos was at a place called Poplar Creek Music Theater here in Hoffman Estates in one of the suburbs, which no longer exists anymore. And we had great seats. We were like 10th row dead center. And I think that it was one of the best sounding shows I've ever heard. It was outdoors, and just the acoustic and the detail, everything was just really, really amazing. And Roger was in great form. He really seemed to be enjoying himself. At the end, he made a comment that, this is Chicago, and so the way that we cheer on the Chicago Bears at the time was like, whoo, 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 right? And so the crowd started doing that during the show. And Roger made a comment. He goes, I like that sound. It sounds very, not tribal, but animalistic, something like that.
Yeah.
And he started doing it back at us. He started going, whoo, 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 whoo. And then finally someone must have said something to him and he went, oh, it's the Bears. And
Yeah.
especially 1985, the Bears won the Super Bowl, right? Which they haven't since.
Yeah.
So the Bears fans were just really, really
I think we have even a
excited still.
recording of that
Yes, there is a
show.
recording.
Yeah.
Yeah, my friend, that was recorded by a friend of mine, a local recorder who had done recordings for so many years and shared with us. So yeah, the most famous recording of a lot of these Chicago shows were done by my friend Rick Barnett,
Oh,
an
great.
incredible
Okay.
taper, an incredibly generous human being too. I once had a party for, I don't know, one of the shows that was going on, the Wall Show or something, and Rick showed up literally with a cardboard box filled with CDRs of all the Floyd shows that he recorded for anybody who just wanted them.
Oh,
He just hand them
wonderful.
out. So that was the Poplar Creek show. That was wonderful, and the place was packed. But then a few months later, he came back to Chicago and actually played in Chicago. He played at a place called McCormick Place, Airy Crown Theater, and it was maybe like half filled.
Yeah.
So it was like I was really surprised. And I was friends with a girl at the time who I was trying to date, who I was totally unsuccessful in dating, but we're still friends. And she worked in a record store, and she knew what a big Pink Floyd fan I was. And she had recently helped to promote Paul Carrick's most recent release. Paul Carrick was playing keyboards and doing a lot of vocals on the Chaos tour. And so she got us backstage passes for the show. So after the Chaos show at Airy Crown, we got to go backstage, and the whole band was there. It was pretty cool. Everybody was signing my program, Jim Ladd and the two backup singers, and Jay Stapley, and everybody was very talkative and very friendly and very nice. But Roger would not come out.
Yeah.
He would not come out of his dressing room or whatever. He wouldn't talk to any of us. And so I kept saying, we really want to get, can Roger sign something? Can Roger sign something? And I guess maybe it must have been maybe the head of his security or something like that. He goes, I'll tell you what. He goes, if you wait up at the top of the ramp where they exit with the vans and all that, you know, we'll open the door for a minute and, maybe Roger will sign some stuff for you. So there were maybe about 20 of us, waiting at the top of the ramp or whatever. And I'll never forget the band pulls up, you know, sliding door slides open. There's Roger in the back seat there, and the manager's there or something. Goes, okay, let's keep this organized. And for some reason, everybody decided that I was going to be in charge. And so I got up to the van, and people would hand me this stuff, and I'd hand it to the manager, and Roger would sign it, and I'd hand it back to them. I don't know how that happened or why that happened, but I guess they just didn't want to deal with like a mob of people all
Yeah.
rushing the van. And I was telling people, like, we got to kind of like, if this opportunity comes up, you don't want to blow it. So everybody
Yeah.
behave yourselves. And so I had he signed my wall CD, which I eventually like. I think it sold to Vernon Fitch years ago, and he signed my tour program, which was very, very cool. So and he still had the dark glasses on. It's like nighttime. He's in a black van in a
Yeah, that
parking
was
lot,
strange. Yeah.
and he wouldn't look at us. He didn't say a word to us or whatever. And this isn't a complaint, and it's not a criticism. It's just an observation, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Roger, for actually stopping to do that. I think he embraces fans much more decades later. But that's my memories from the Chaos tour. The
So
show itself was a lot of fun. I like the way that he mixed up the set list with Jim Ladd, like a DJ playing Floyd stuff and going back to the Chaos stuff with Billy. And so it was a
so
really fun show.
interesting. So you liked it because we had that discussion too about the Radio Chaos show, and I personally couldn't understand how it could have been a nice concert experience being interrupted so many times by a DJ, by the phone booth where the fans could ask questions to Roger and everything. But Adam was there, and Adam was also totally excited, and he explained to me that the original radio shows, rock radio shows in the United States, were exactly like that, and people were used to that, and so it was a wonderful concert experience.
Yeah, also the whole phone booth interview thing, it was at halftime. It was intermission.
Ah,
So
okay, yeah,
it was an interruption during the show anyway.
okay. Only Jim
Yeah,
Ladd then,
so
yeah.
yeah,
If
yeah. So
you understand that
Jim
as an
Ladd,
interruption.
and that was like, it was a concept album. It was a
Yeah.
conceptual show, and
Hmm.
so we accepted that's what it was, and it was pretty cool the way that it all played out. I really liked it. So yeah, it's not one of my favorite albums anymore, but at the time I was crazy about it, and I really loved both of the shows, and
Yeah.
I was just really I almost took it personally that the venue was only half full. I'm like, we're all the fans. We're all you people.
Yeah, so they decided to go to Pink Floyd because they got much more promotion money in there and they totally hammered Roger Waters on that. I understand his frustration about it at that
I
time,
don't
to be
know. I
honest.
mean, I don't. It's like again, tickets weren't astronomically priced back then. There should have been love for everybody, but there was the Pink Floyd name versus Roger Waters, who just toured a few years before, and maybe people were just left shaking their heads after the pros and cons sets and didn't know what to think of it. And so they were thinking, no Clapton, I'm not going back this time.
Yeah, it must have happened at the Pros and Cons tour already that they, when he played the Pink Floyd set in the first half, that they left the show. So at the second half, there were much less people in the venues, and so that might have been a reason why he mixed it more on the Radio Chaos. I mean, it's frustrating, but
I,
it is
I,
what it is.
I, I never noticed any exodus during the shows at all, but
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if some people left during the second half.
yeah,
It's like, there's always the song where you go out to go to the bathroom or get beers, right? This was like the entire set where you left to go to the bathroom or get a beer or have a nice meal and then come back.
yeah, yeah. At that time, that might have been normal. Today, I would think, oh my God, how could you have missed that? But anyway, so and then just a few weeks later, Pink Floyd started their tour in the US with Echoes.
Yes.
So you heard Echoes
Yeah.
live, the whole train wreck, the whole thing.
Let's back it up a little bit because I have a fun story to tell you about that. So knowing that Pink Floyd was going on tour again, and this was so early on in the tour, a friend of mine came to visit. Glenn Povey, you might have heard of him.
Yeah, sure.
At the time, yeah, Glenn was publishing a fanzine called Brain Damage Magazine at the time, and I was writing. I came to write reviews of the different shows or the video bootlegs that were coming up from the tour at the time. But a young 21-year-old Glenn set foot in the United States for the very first time, and I picked him up at O'Hare Airport, and he spent a few days with me along with my friend Richard. I think this was the no. I brought up Richard earlier. This was the first time I saw Richard too. Richard was an expatriate. He was from the UK as well. He was living in LA, and we had become friends during the Pros and Cons tour. And so both Richard and Glenn came to visit me to see the shows in Chicago. And Glenn had tickets for the first two nights with me. And same thing with Richard. We had tickets for the first two nights, even though they were playing four shows there. And um, being the crazy Pink Floyd fans that they were, the day of the show, they said, let's go to the venue. Let's go to the Rosemont Horizon and we'll see what we could see. Maybe we could get backstage. Maybe we could get like an interview. They wanted to get, especially with Glenn publishing Brain Damage Magazine, he wanted to see if he could get an interview with the band. Like, yeah, you're right. And so we took a train out to Rosemont, and we're walking around we're like idiots. We're walking around the venue, and somehow there was like an open door.
Oh, come
And they're
on.
like, "Come on, let's go in." I'm like, "We can't go in. We'll get yelled at. We'll get in trouble." And as I'm saying that, they're already inside. So I'm following them in, and we have cameras. We're taking pictures of everything. There's the crashing plane, right,
Yeah.
is laying out on the stage. No, it's unassembled now, and we're seeing them setting up the stage and all this other stuff. And nobody's saying anything to us. We're just walking around, taking pictures and talking. And I don't remember the entire sequence of events, but what happened is when we finally left, I said, "Look, I got to leave. I had stuff to do. I had a girlfriend at the time that I had to meet up with, and that I was going to take to the show with me." So I went back to my place, and about an hour and a half later, Glenn and Richard walked through my front door, and they were like shaking. They were like, "We met Steve O'Rourke." And both of them had British accents,
Yeah.
which might have endeared them a little bit to Mr. O'Rourke, even though he playfully threatened them that they were wearing Brain Damage shirts with the Dark Side of the Moon prism on it, and said, "Oh, that's copyright infringement." And so they said to me, they said that Steve said that we could do an interview with the band. He said, "Come back at 6 o'clock. We'll get backstage and we'll let you interview the band for Brain Damage." And I'm like, "No way." And they're like, "Yeah." And they said, we got to get a tape recorder somehow. Is there somewhere we get a tape recorder? I'm like, "Well, look, I gotta," and this is one of my big regrets in life. You're not going to believe I said this, because I'm saying, "Well, I got to go pick up my girlfriend."
Oh, come on.
And so seriously, I passed up an opportunity to go backstage and meet Pink Floyd and interview the band. And it's like, still, it's like, geez.
So it actually happened,
So
the interview.
it actually happened. They didn't get a tape recorder. They couldn't find a tape recorder, but they took I don't know how much money they spent on cabs, but they took a cab back to Rosemont. They went backstage, and Steve introduced them to Dave and Rick, and to Nick. And I think it was David Gilmour that they were really interviewing, that spoke to them most of the time. And he talked about Roger quitting. They talked about When the Wind Blows, how Roger was allowed to do this if they were allowed to do that. It was really interesting, the conversation that they had. And they did bring a tour program and had everybody sign it for me. The only one who didn't sign it was Rick. God bless him. He just wasn't into doing signatures that day or that year or ever. And so I did get that. And I'll never forget that after we got home from the show, I set up a video camera, sat them right in front of me, and did an interview on video to recall everything that happened during that interview.
Okay.
And it was really wonderful just seeing how happy and excited they were and telling some really fun stories that happened at the time. I still have that video on a beta tape somewhere that I should try to dig up and have transferred, but it was really wonderful. Imagine that, Glenn, 20-year-old Glenn coming to the States for the first time and having an opportunity like this. So
Yeah,
that was a lot
fantastic.
of fun. And then after a couple of days, Glenn left, and Richard and I ended up buying tickets for the other two shows at Rosemont. So we went to all four shows. And then a few days later, I saw them at Milwaukee County Stadium, which was huge. It was like, man, it was like, I kind of regret seeing that show because the indoor Horizon shows were just so perfect. And we were sitting so far away in Milwaukee. We
Yeah.
really couldn't see anything. And the sound wasn't that great. So
But
that was
how was it for you? I
oh,
mean,
okay,
after
okay.
84,
So
85 and 87, all these I would say moderate size shows, then you have this huge Pink Floyd over everything. Sure. I mean, it was so bombastic and so big.
it was, but you got to remember that we had seen him in the same venue that we saw Roger perform Pros and Cons. The Rosemont
Yeah,
Horizon
okay.
only holds 15, 18,000 seats, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's not really a huge stadium. It's indoors.
Yeah,
So
true enough.
it was all in your face. I mean, the robotic laser things were hitting us in the face, and we had no idea what they were going to perform, right? And so when they opened with the opening notes of Echoes, right, that opening ping, we all lost our shit. I
Yeah.
mean, we were like, couldn't believe it. And but then when they kind of like combined all of the lyrics, the different verses together, right? We knew we were kind of like getting an abridged version of it, and it was still really cool. Um, yeah, it was pretty amazing. The irony is, I remember, I missed the show because I had to pick up my girlfriend, and I didn't even end up sitting with her for the show because we had so much better seats. I gave her a ticket and said, "Here, just go with your friend and sit there." It's like
Oh.
I, I think she broke up with me shortly after, which I could understand. But yeah, it was amazing hearing a lot of these songs being performed for the first time ever. It was amazing being able to see some of these visuals that we knew about for the
Yeah,
first
Welcome to
time
the
ever. Like,
Machine, I,
yeah,
for
oh,
example.
Welcome Machine, my God, and
Yeah.
Time. And we're talking about animation,
Yeah.
and here I'm a few years into my career. I'm really into animation. And to see all of that stuff and just to see them perform all of it was just amazing, especially for that first show because we did not know what they were going to perform. And again, Echoes was just performed for the first show. So the second show, when we were expecting them to open with Echoes, and instead they opened up with "Shine on You Crazy Diamond," it was again, just a mind blowing
Yeah,
experience.
they were testing it the first few shows and then realized Echo's not gonna work. They have to put that away. Unfortunately,
It's
but
a it's a tough number to open the show with, but they did that in 1971 for a while, I believe, right? They opened up the show with Echoes. That's a
yeah,
weird number to start with
yeah,
because it's very mellow. You can't start a Pink Floyd show with a very kind of like mellowish song. I mean, it picks up
yeah,
after some time, but there's just so much yelling and screaming. You want to come up with
yeah.
something a
It's a
little bit
perfect
more.
encore, I
Yeah,
would say.
I think that's one of the reasons why that they didn't open up the Animal show with Pigs on the Wing Part 1
Yeah,
is because no one would have heard it.
yeah. But even
And
cheap, I
so,
would say it's not a perfect start. I think I would have started
well,
with
it's a loud start.
yeah. That at least that's true.
Yeah. Yeah, even though you really couldn't hear, when Rick started playing the opening intro, the jazzy intro on the keyboards, right? It was a little hard to hear, and people were yelling, "Sit down" and "Shut up" and
Yeah.
"Suey" and all that stuff at the time. So, yeah, until it actually kicked in, yeah.
So
Yeah,
do
it
you
was it
remember at
was
that time, 87 and 18, 88, 89, where they were touring for like ages and hundreds of venues? Um, I mean, there have had been already many changes in Pink Floyd from like Sid Barrett in the very early days, and then the Roger Waters, David Gilmour phase, and then the post Dark Side, which was very different because the old numbers would not have been played like Careful with the Legs, set the controls and everything. And then moving on to Animals and The Wall, which was also very different. And then having that post Waters era in 87 with a bombastic show, but many, all the critics about it. And I even said in the podcast that I didn't really like the zoo with the, saxophonists and everything dancing around. And it was a little bit, I mean, it was not the Pink Floyd I remembered personally, but still, I saw them in Cologne in '89. And besides the sound, which was also difficult because it was a soccer stadium, it was totally overwhelming, and I was flabbergasted. But how did you see at that time? Did you realize how much it changed already? Or was it just being there was just great?
Well, obviously, you didn't have to be there to realize how much the music had changed. It had become very electronic, very 80s,
Hmm.
chaos. That goes without speaking. But yeah, there were a lot of electronic drums and programming and a momentary lapse of reason as well. And that just bled right into the shows. So the newer music was different, especially Waters, because Roger tried to change around still a lot of the, original Pink Floyd stuff to make it more of his own, where Pink Floyd's, the new stuff from A Momentary Lapse of Reason sounded a little bit different. There were a few exceptions, like Sorrow. Didn't have, well, it did have some electronic keyboards in it, but, so did some stuff in The Wall, sounded a little bit like that.
Yeah.
But I like that David Gilmour's Pink Floyd in '87 and '88 tried to stay truer to the original material, either to the original recordings or how they performed them back at the time. So
Yeah.
yeah, the changes were obvious, but they were there. I think that there were you know it was less noticeable on the Pink for the in the Pink Floyd shows than the Roger Waters shows. Of course, there was this, as you say, the circus on stage, having all these supplemental performers helping them flesh out the sound. But they had a whole surrogate band for the wall too. It wasn't that much different, except like you say, Scott Page, who gets a lot of criticism for his theatrics on stage, and I really didn't mind that at all. Or what was there? The second drummer who was back in the
Yeah,
cage,
I
just
don't remember the
bouncing
name, but in
around.
that cage, jumping around and
Gary
doing the.
Gary Wallace,
Yeah, correct.
was it Gary Wallace? Right.
Yeah.
So it didn't bother me that much. It was noticeable, but I wouldn't think that it had any negative effect because we were just too psyched to be there to begin with.
So how would you compare it to the '94 World Tour? Because I said, in being provocative, I said that the '94 shows were the boring versions of the '87 shows. But would you agree on that or
Yeah.
disagree?
Well, for the '94 show, it was cool because I was on my honeymoon. I planned my, it was crazy. I planned my honeymoon. We got married in Jamaica. And my sister was still living in Miami at the time, and so from Jamaica we flew to Miami. I timed that wedding and honeymoon so we could see opening night of the tour in Miami at Joe Robbie Stadium. Uh,
A true dedicated Pink
and
Floyd fan.
I know, right? And I got to meet Vernon Fitch for the first time on that tour in the
Great.
flesh,
Yeah.
which was very nice in Miami. And so I met him, which was really, really cool. And it was, yeah, it was disappointing to me that there were so few changes in the set list. Especially so because they opened up with Astronomy Domine, which set my expectations really high. Like, wow, I can't imagine what they're going to play during the show. And then suddenly, unfortunately, I could imagine what they were going to play during
Yeah.
the show. Oh, here's another thing though that was really interesting. When we saw the show in Miami, the Division Bell had yet to be released.
I see. Okay.
So we were hearing all of this new music for the very first time, and I think I was furiously trying to take notes or remember stuff like "Great Day for Freedom" being performed and a few other songs, but yeah, none of us had heard a lick of music from that album before seeing that show in Miami.
Yeah. But
But
that was.
but after that, I have to agree with you. It was more like the Lapse tour on steroids. It was a little bit more beefed up. A little bit disappointed that there wasn't a change in the set list. I ended up seeing that show at the Rose. Wasn't in the Rose Bowl. I think I saw it in San Diego, in Pasadena with my friend Richard, and then I saw it in Chicago at Soldier Field in this huge, huge stadium. But again, we had secured like 12th row seats. I don't remember how we got that, but they were great seats for the show. And it was fun. Well, you think I'm ever going to complain about a Pink Floyd show? I don't think that's going to happen.
No, that's true. Yeah, I saw them also again in Cologne in '94, and the sound was much better. And I remember it was a great night. It was warm and everything was great. And it's so strange because I complained a little bit about Scott Page and Gary Wallace and everything, but then it was both were gone in 1904, and it was all much calmer and more Pink Floyd on the stage, but still something I missed. I like the Division Bell as an album, but I think it's not a great live album besides High Hopes maybe.
Well, it had Dick Parry. That was a
Yeah,
good saxophone swap,
that was
right?
great.
You had
Yes.
an original Pink Floyd, I wouldn't say member, but the guy who played saxophone on Dark Side and Wish You Were Here, recreating his solos was pretty damn cool.
Yeah.
So it
So
had that going for it.
yeah, that's true. So fast forward to 99, and between 99 and 2017 you saw Roger Waters 12 times again.
Did I?
Um, I think he didn't dare to tour with the Muse to Death album, even though it's a wonderful album. But I think it would have been very difficult to play that live, and I think he was a little bit frustrated about the tour in '87 not being commercially successful and not fighting again against Pink Floyd, the whole machinery there. Um, for all these years between '99 and 2017, which tour or shows stood out for you as being?
I love the '99 tour. We
Yeah,
we
me too.
saw, I think, opening night of the tour in Milwaukee. I think that's where I met Rolf maybe for the first time. I can't remember. Was it that or on the Wall tour? It probably was that. I think we had like a bunch of people staying over at my house that came in from all over the world, to see Roger perform because that's where he started the tour here. So a lot of us went to Milwaukee. Um, yeah, that's right. Ralph Aussenberg, was
Yeah,
there. I remember he got lost. We couldn't find him. He eventually found his way back to John Rosenberg's place wherever we were staying at the time. The thing about the '99 tour and 2000 tour, like I said before, I think Roger was embracing his Pink Floyd
yes.
legacy a bit more. He was staying more faithful
He
to
was
the
much
original
more in
numbers.
peace with the old Pink
Well,
Floyd.
yeah, yeah, and he
Yeah,
didn't have an album to tour. He played some songs from Amused to Death, just like he was playing songs from his other solo album mixed into the Pink Floyd songs. It was a very low budget tour. We're
yes.
talking about it looked like he had a sheet up, no screen. There was literally like a cloth sheet
Yeah,
that the images were being projected on. And the place we saw him at in Milwaukee was such a small venue. Even where we saw him in Chicago, outside of Chicago, at the Rosemont Theater, I don't think it holds more than like 3 or 4 thousand seats.
yeah. Oh,
So it seemed to be a very, very small venue for Roger to be playing, but it was one of the great experiences having so many people from, like Ray Steig, who was a big collector, and Rolf was there, and I'm sure a lot of other people were staying over that were there from out of town. Same thing for when the Wall show came to town in 2010. Um, I hosted a bunch of people, and it was a lot of fun, but it was a great show. I think of all of Roger's tours, this is the one that I really love the most because of the reason that he was kind of embracing his
yeah,
legacy again, and he didn't have really any new material, relatively new
yeah,
material to promote. And yeah, so and after that, it started to be more of a tribute act because I believe the tour after that was when he was doing Dark Side of the Moon in its
correct.
entirety,
Yeah, I would put in
which he
2002 also as between '99 and 2002. I like these shows most because they're really
yeah.
it's a wonderful show, and the rendition of the Pink Floyd tracks as the solo tracks, you almost can't even make a difference between. It's all one very nice. It's a very nice setup he had there. And yeah, in
And I
2006
yeah.
then he started with the Dark Side.
Yeah, I loved the band at the time too. I loved Doyle Brummel on guitar. I,
Yeah,
kn- I know he put his own twist
yeah,
on it,
loved him.
because that's who
Absolutely.
he is. But oh my God, just to see him play live, Doyle, that was pretty freaking amazing.
Yeah,
Watching him cover that, a lot of Gilmour stuff. So that was and Snowy White was on tour with him too, right?
Correct.
So and oh my God, and to see him perform Dogs on that tour,
Yeah.
that and to see both Snowy and Doyle doing those harmonic guitar
Yes.
solos, that was like goosebumps. That was pretty much almost like the Pink Floyd highlight at that time was
Exactly.
seeing them
Yeah.
perform Dogs. Yeah, that was just so amazing.
Yeah.
For the ensuing tours, like you said, when he did and also he was playing some new material like Leaving Beirut, right? Well, didn't he play
Leaving
Leaving Beirut in
Beirut
that
was
tour and
2006,
Eat
but
Small Candle?
he played how was it called?
Eat Small
Candle?
Candle.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Small
Eat Small
Candle,
Candle.
which I really
Yeah,
love live. It's a
yeah,
wonderful song live. You know
yeah,
how he's the singing between the backing singers and him and everything. It's a wonderful, wonderful track.
yeah. And I saw that tour also in Florida at the Mars Amphitheater in West Palm Beach. I went with an old friend of mine who called, "Hey, Roger's playing here. You want to fly in and see him?" I'm okay. At the time, too, um, I have to go back in my head. What year did I get married? Oh, 94. No. Everything after 94, I married a flight attendant. So
Yeah.
all my airline, travel was pretty much free from
Okay.
94 all the way to for the next 20 years until we broke up.
And that's great. Yeah. So in 2006, I saw him 2007 in Berlin, live at the Waldbühne with Ducks of the Moon. It was funny. I went with two colleagues of mine who had never heard Pink Floyd or Roger Waters before, and they were a little bit disappointed of the first set, but they liked the second set, which was Ducks of the Moon, of course. But yeah, to me it was different. It was not comparable to the 1999 to 2002 shows he did there. As you say, it's a little bit like a cover band playing Pink Floyd. Or it's,
Yeah, the cool thing about that tour though was that Cole Turner had Fleeting Glimpse website and of course the FG forum at the time, and a lot of us on the forum all decided that we were going to get together and go to the show in Denver at the Pepsi Center,
yeah.
and so that's where I met Matt, the doctor,
Mm-hmm.
for the first time, and I think Cole was there and a bunch of other people that we all showed up at the Pepsi Center to see his show there. That was really cool. Again, a lot of it is about meeting the people. I was good friends with Simon Wimpmany at the time, and it was fun getting together with everybody. So it was a fun show. I wasn't a big fan of Roger performing Dark Side of the Moon in its entirety. He had every right to do it, but I would have rather have seen him do a lot more of his own songs, his own work or other Pink Floyd stuff rather than see him perform an album for which he only really sang on the last two songs. So it was like I said, it was a bit of a cover band. The visuals were kind of interesting, but it was okay. We had a great time at the time. Everybody loved it at the time. So
Yeah.
me thinking back, this is more of like in retrospect, thinking that okay, it was fun at the time, but now looking back on it, I just wish he did
Yeah. But again, go
more stuff.
as you say, as you told me before, being there in Berlin, going to Berlin, being at the Waldbühne, and the whole evening, the whole night was just fantastic. So it's all good. Everything was just good. But the shows before just stood out more for me, were much more exciting. But talking about excitement, the Roger Waters, the Wall tour between 2010 and 2012. I was there in Düsseldorf. I had I had booked a short vacation with my wife at that time, and I had to tell her that I totally missed the date. So we had to get back from Spain, or I had to go back from Spain for 2 days, and then going back to Spain again, which was horrible. But I was with one of my best friends, or my best friend there, and I remember that I was just crying throughout the whole show because I was so overwhelmed by everything, the dynamic, the music, the visuals, and everything. So, how do you reflect on that compared to 1980?
Well, again, a lot of it was about the people because um, I believe he opened the tour in Toronto
Hmm.
for a few shows, and then Chicago. So we had the show very, very early on. There was no fascists, uniforms.
Hmm.
There was no leather, anything like that. Everybody on stage was wearing black hoodies, because the costumes weren't ready yet or weren't designed yet, for whatever reason. So it was very early on. But again, it was everybody kind of like, I was the center hub where everyone gathered before the show. There were a bunch of people staying with us, and then even more people from the forum that got invited over to my house before the show. We threw a big party in the backyard, which was really, really wonderful. Had like 30, maybe 40 people there. Got to meet a lot of friends from the forum I hadn't met before. And then after the show was over, they all came back to my place again. We had a big party in the backyard. People were playing guitars and playing songs from the wall. I had my neighbor stop by who was a violin player and joined us for Mother.
Great.
And it was just a really, really special time to spend with all of my old friends and my new friends at the time. Now, the show itself, I had a little bit of a mixed reaction to it. While I did appreciate the spectacle and the reinterpret and I wouldn't say the reinterpretation, but not yet. I don't want to put that in the same sentences as the other things that I'm appreciating. But the spectacle and just the attempt at reimagining the wall was very impressive, right? But there were a few things that really got under my skin that I didn't like about the wall.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was the whole hypocrisy of it.
Yeah.
Was that the whole Wall album and the tour, which was barely a tour, which was a response to Roger being put off with the Animals tour
Yeah, it was a
and
statement.
losing that connection with the audience,
Yeah.
right? It had no connection with the audience, right? Because they went from playing smaller venues, indoor venues, right, to giant outdoor football stadiums, and he had lost that connection with the audience. And here he was playing gigantic, huge venues and eventually huge outdoor stadiums again with the Wall. And I was thinking about, boy, this is kind of like antithetical. This is different than the message behind the Wall. And again, trying to update it, I think that it lost the original story of Pink,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it went past that. It went into a lot of stuff that was happening politically these days, which is really when I think the Wall is when Roger started getting into politics a little bit more, and he started doing things like dropping religious symbols out of the back of fighter planes, like the cross and the Star of David and things like that. And again, by putting the Star of David on the pig and noticing things like that, I had to think to myself, that does he really know what he's
Yeah.
doing here? How this could really be, if people don't know Roger and what his point, the point he's trying to get across, I
Mm-hmm.
started to see that he was crossing into what could be dangerous territory at the time. So while I loved the performance musically, I had no problem with it. Visually, what he was trying to portray in some cases, I wasn't a really big fan of. I also wasn't a really big fan of the new graphics that were being used, which were pretty stark and almost generic
Mm-hmm.
compared to the work that Gerald Scarfe had done in the past. And so I think that's when he started working with Sean
Mm-hmm.
for the first time on that tour.
Mm-hmm.
Was that it? And just never been a fan of the guy's work from that point on. So while I appreciated the scale of the show and the attempt that was made to make it what it is and the musical perfection of recreating that, which I really did enjoy, I had some issues with the show itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get you there. I mean, it's always a difficult discussion, and as you know from the forums, every single sentence you write about it can create a lot of trouble. But I totally get you. And then we had, even in Germany, we had the Frankfurt, he should have been cancelled or he not cancelled, and Munich again. And it was all about that. And even though even though I believe him that it's not meant that way, it's very difficult to put it out like that, not explaining it. And that's the thing. I mean,
He,
if it can be misunderstood, and it had been misunderstood, why didn't he ever try to explain it the right way?
well, you know what? It's one of the many reasons I've come to love Germany so much. It's because of the way that they feel about things like that. Anything that could be seen as anti-Semitic or anything like that. There's a great sensitivity. Like they don't allow any Nazis
Yeah.
in Germany. Well, we have them all over the U.S. right now,
Mm.
just out in broad daylight. Like, what's the deal with that? And I'm sorry, I don't want to really stray into politics here
Yeah.
at all, but it is one of the things one of the many things that I really do appreciate about your country. But it didn't, those visual aspects of the show really didn't offend me at the time.
Mm.
So, and I know that in on recently that's really been brought up again, and people don't realize that he's been doing it for 14 years. Um, and no matter what Roger claims his intentions were, there is some kind of a little bit naive and a little bit insensitivity there that I don't think that he cares about. Like, I don't think that he cares that he's being insensitive. Yeah, I don't really want to go into like the political aspects, and I don't really want to talk about Roger, the recent Roger, too much. But getting back to the wall shows, I did like the shows. I saw it a couple of times in Chicago. Um, Cole Turner came with flew in to see the show at Wrigley Field here, where the Cubs play, and then we flew to New York. Stayed with my parents in New York. Who Cole became like best friends with my father. It's really great how they hit it off.
He's a great guy.
And we saw it we saw the show at Yankee Stadium, and he got us backstage at Yankee Stadium, and got to meet everybody there. They were so nice. Uh, Except Roger. I'm not saying he was nice. He just didn't come out. But people like Harry Waters, who you had on your show,
Yeah.
was a lovely, lovely person.
Yes, he is.
And so was G.E. Smith and Snowy and everybody else that was talking. The background singers, especially the guys who are based out of the West Coast now, who I've stayed Facebook friends with. They're all really, really lovely people. And so that was really nice to get to go backstage for that. And see it performed a few more times with with no expectations. I knew exactly what the show was going to be by that point in time, and it was fun, especially at the Wrigley Field show, because again, my boy, memory is a stranger, but I know that I'm pretty sure it was at the Wrigley Field show that the pig descended into the audience on top of a bunch of my friends
Oh,
who ripped it to shreds and were generous enough to share pieces of the pigs with us after the show. So I still have my pig piece somewhere tucked away. So that was kind of fun in a very, very strange way. At first you're wondering if this was an accident, if it was really supposed to happen, and then in retrospect you realize that Roger was dropping the pig down into the crowd to
they did it in
literally be torn to
77
pieces.
by the end of the tour because they wanted to get rid of the pig. I mean, Mr.
Is
Pig.
that right?
Yeah, they blew it.
Well, I know at some shows they had a different kind of pig, like in Milwaukee, there was the pig that came out from behind the stage in
Yeah,
a giant billow of smoke that went around the audience and then came back to the other side of the stage when Roger called him back during pigs, right? Um, and yeah, there was a whole controversy on that Montreal recording with
yeah,
Roger yelling, "Hey, come back!
yeah,
Come back! All is forgiven."
yeah.
It's like people were actually thinking that he was talking to the kid that he
Yeah. Oh
spat
no,
on.
that's a
No, no,
pig
he
he's
was.
calling back. Yeah,
Yeah, he was dialoguing with the pig.
yeah.
Come on home, boy. And so
I
yeah,
think in
and so it
77
was.
they had two pigs. They had the Mr. Pig
Yeah,
and they burned that, but then they had another pig. I think the pink pig came up later. I think it was somehow
they
during the
had
show.
they had disposable pigs
Yeah,
for some of the outdoor shows that they blew up.
yeah. They-
And then for the indoor shows, they had the theatrical pig that said hello to everybody as he went over them.
Yeah. So even there is no real segue, let's go to David Gilmour now and just talk about the 2006 and 2015-16 tour. 2006, I saw him live and I was totally excited. His Echoes version, I would say, is the perfect rendition of that, even f- compared to 71 and 72. It's a wonderful version, and the whole show, the whole setup is just very exciting, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, two words, Richard Wright, right? I
Yep.
mean, that's it. I mean, oh my God, just to see them perform live, and again, as usual, I had a bunch of people come and visit and stay with me. It was the first time that Vernon came by and actually stayed at my place, and he was comp some tickets. So we had uh, like 10th row dead center seats, which was very cool. And we sat next to Michael Pillett. Michael
Okay.
Pillett was his name. And he sat next to us for the show, and he was going to be like there the next night too. And so I, I gave him, I gave him the Harvested bootleg, that the DVD that we did called the Calhoun tapes,
Yeah.
and we gave him a copy of that. And Vernon gave him a copy of his book that he had brought at the time, and we got to go backstage for those shows. Got to talk to everybody. My favorite was talking to Dick Perry, and especially Guy Pratt. Well, another really lovely guy.
Yeah.
And he saw that I was a little bit, I wouldn't say standoffish or shy, but a little bit apprehensive. I didn't want to be like an overly eager fan, totally in his face. And he called me over,
Yeah.
and he was like, "This is like a bloody Pink Floyd show, isn't it?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Oh, it's amazing." And he was just such a nice person, Guy Pratt. And so we didn't get to see David. David was in like a separate area. And I remember that Michael was there. Michael told us that he went to visit David once while he was working with him. And he had commented on how much he liked his car. And David gave him his car. What a nice thing to do. And so I remember we were in the whatever you call that area backstage where they have some food out and stuff where the rest of the band was. I guess David's manager at the time came up and said and called in the special people who got to meet
Yeah.
David. Michael was one of them, and he left for a little bit and came back. And so that and so, but the shows themselves were just really beautiful. I'm a huge fan of On an Island. I just love the maturity of it. People think that it's like Old Man Gilmour, that there weren't enough upbeat numbers, or
Yeah.
there weren't enough solos on it or whatever. I disagree. I just really love the album. I love the flow of it. I love seeing it performed live. It was just like it chills, and
Yeah.
seeing
I like
echoes.
it much more live.
See,
I think it comes
yeah,
to life.
oh yeah, absolutely. But seeing the interplay between David and Rick,
Yeah.
especially during Echoes, and there were many other parts of the show.
Yeah.
We could see the eye contact between them, but especially Echoes. That was really something that was very magical. That was really wonderful.
Yeah. And that all of that got, of course, I mean, Rick Wright unfortunately died in 2008, correct?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then the I like Rattle That Lock a lot, the album, but the show, it was okay, it was great. Of course, musically it was wonderful. I saw him in Oberhausen in 2015,
Mm.
but to be honest, I left early because I thought it would be okay to go away, not being stuck in the parking lot. I left early, not because I didn't like it. But 2015 for me was a bit disappointing because it was, yeah, maybe of Rick Wright. I don't know, because 2006 was so great. I don't know. I can't really explain it.
No, I think you explained it pretty well. I think a lot of people felt that way too. I really enjoyed the tour. I was really into the album at the time. I was really into the shows at the time. Just to see David performing live always gives me chills, and seeing him perform songs like, especially like Faces of Stone,
Yeah,
just that solo at the end had me
true
just
enough.
so choked up, just tremendous. And I just want to see. I don't care as long as if he's performing live. I just love seeing the musician.
Yeah.
I just love seeing him play guitar. I love hearing him sing. In retrospect, in hindsight, you're right. I feel the same way about both tours. I think that the On an Island tour was superior. Um, and I don't want to say it's only because Rick was with him. But I do like that tour a lot more. I don't really. I did watch Pompeii the other night, live at Pompeii. I do really like that show. I love that performance. I love that show, and I know some people were unhappy with the way that he mixed up the band and got some new players there. But
Whatever happened
I love
there?
Chuck.
Whatever
I
happened
love
there?
Chuck Level.
Yeah.
I love Chuck Level.
Mm-hmm.
I love Phil, who is on keyboards. I like the change up. I really appreciated it. Like he said, people were starting to play stuff too close to Pink Floyd. It was almost like playing in a
Mm-hmm.
cover band. He
Mm-hmm.
said in a recent interview,
Ah,
and
okay. Yeah.
he wanted to get some musicians that weren't so reverential to him, that weren't like bowing down to David Gilmour, the god, the
Yeah.
guitar god, or just following the music note by note. He wanted to get some musicians who would add a little bit of their own flavor to it, which I really respect and appreciate, and that's why I'm really looking forward to this new tour. I'm just hoping that he does eventually come to the States. I can't imagine that he wouldn't do that, even if it's just like three cities like
Yeah.
LA, Chicago, and New York. But it would be wonderful to see him. I know that I will get to see this tour one way or another through either videos online or something that hopefully will be professionally shot and released. I know he's still working with Gavin Elder, right? Who uh, who shot the video for his new single that's out.
Yeah.
So let's hope that he keeps using him as his video director and producer. That would be really nice. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that I would bet money on him wanting to capture this tour for
Yeah. Would
prosperity
be
as
would be
well, right?
lovely. So before we wrap things up, I would talk. I would like to talk with you about the Nick Mason Source Full of Secrets, which you saw many times. I saw many times. I saw him in Düsseldorf and then again in Oberhausen. And I went with the same friend. I went to Rome and I saw them in an auditorium in Rome in a wonderful night, very special night. And it's, as you know, I talked to Lee Harris and I'm very thankful. And I told him that. And I think we all should be very thankful to him and Guy Pratt and all these guys, Gary Camp. Um, what a wonderful setup this is, and a wonderful tour they're doing now for 5 years already, which is really exciting.
Yeah, you're right. Lee Harris is a mensch. He's a wonderful human being, a really nice person. Um, I, I I wouldn't go so far as to assume to say that we're friends now, but we've stayed in contact.
Mm.
We've actually Zoom chatted a few times over stuff. We contact each other every now and then. I did a few days ago, in fact, and he met me uh, outside of the Riverside Theater in Milwaukee
Hmm.
before the show. I was at a Subway eating my dinner, and I saw him out there. I said, "Come on, I'm in here," and we sat down and we talked for a while. And he handed me his. I think I had front row seats for that show. He handed me his pick after the show, and he's been really nice. And on the second leg of the tour, when they added Childhood's End, he asked me if I had any recordings of the Pink Floyd performing it live. And I think it's the St. Owen show, which was like a radio
Mm.
broadcast from '72. There's a great performance of that. And I sent that to them. And the band actually used, he told me, part of that tape as the introduction to the song
Yeah, he
in
told me
the
that. Yes.
shows. Yeah, and so yeah, such a really, really, really nice guy. And so when I heard that he was playing the Beacon Theater in New York, I hedged my bets, thinking that I'll bet Roger's going to show up for that. And so I sprung for a front row seat. It's a lot easier buying tickets when you don't have to buy them for your partner as well. Like when Julie and I go to shows, I'm paying twice as much for tickets. So if I'm spending $400 or $500 on just one seat for me, it's like, okay, I would have spent that on a pair of tickets for us anyway. So I hedged my bets. I got a front row dead center seats for the Beacon Theater show, which was the first time I was at the Beacon. I'm really glad I got to go. It's a beautiful place. And there was a little bit of a discussion. I wonder if Roger's going to show up, and people were saying, "Oh yeah, I heard Roger, pulled up and he was backstage, or whatever. We don't know if he's going to play or not." And I knew from the set list when Set the Controls was going to come out, and had my camera ready to video everything that happened. Sure enough, there he was. He walked out just a few feet in front of me, and everything that I had any, I say, negative thoughts about Roger over the ensuing years just completely melted away during those 10 minutes he was on stage. It was just really, really what I want to see from
Yeah.
Roger Waters,
Yeah.
And so it was really, really great to see, to experience that moment. And I look back at, after the song was over, my friends were like rows and rows back, and just
And thankful we are that you
just
did the recording there. I mean, the
yeah,
videotaping. It's a wonderful video.
yeah, it was fun putting together a little bit of a multicam edit to that, which had about almost a 500,000 hits on YouTube
Yeah.
now. I can't imagine that, but it was just really, really fun to do, and I'm very, very thankful for the Saucers, for Lee coming up with the idea. The thing I love most about them is their approach to the music. They are so enthusiastic about it. They are having so much fun on
Yes.
stage. There's so much energy, contagious, positive energy. You can't help but feel that. Plus, we all love these songs. We can't believe that we're hearing them. We never thought in a million years we'd get to hear these songs performed live,
Yeah.
let alone with Lee and Guy and everybody else that's in that band, and Nick,
Yeah.
Nick on drums.
With a lot of
God
support
bless
from
him.
Guy, with all the
Yeah.
the
Oh
living
my
click
God.
track.
But God bless. God bless Nick. I mean,
Yeah.
going out on tour and putting himself out there
Yeah.
again, and getting his drumming skills up to snuff to do what he does.
Absolutely.
It was just it was the most joyous Pink Floyd experience
Yeah.
of my entire life.
Same here.
Watching and listening to Pink Floyd.
After all these years, that's the point. I mean,
after especially after all these
Yeah.
years, yeah, just it was amazing. It was wonderful. It was mind blowing to see Pink Floyd and Gilmour and Waters all these years, but seeing the Saucers on stage was something different. There was something there that was different. Because you got to remember, Waters and Gilmour, they're still conducting a whole band with all these synchronized visuals and all this other stuff going on, where these guys are just a bunch of musicians that really enjoy performing
Yeah.
with each other, really love performing this music, and have a great time doing it.
Yeah.
So they can be a little bit looser on stage.
Yeah. Yeah. And full respect of the original composing, and the Syd Barrett thing is in there and everything. It opens my heart every single time. And I saw them with Charles Bedrams together at the Lorelei. And again, this is, and I'm going to see them soon again, so I'm looking forward to it. It's really wonderful, and it was.
Well, I hope they come back.
Yeah.
I hope they come back to the States. I definitely would see him again.
Yeah.
I know better than to press Lee about stuff like that. He's only certain things he can talk about, so I know not to ask him about things that I know he really shouldn't talk about. Even in confidence, if he tells me a few things, I really am very hesitant to ever say anything about them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And who else? I'll tell you. You know who else is a really stand-up guy that I'd say, friendly with over the years. I've stayed in touch with for a long time. Is Andy Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
Andy Jackson was his his recording engineer and confidant for so many years up until this last album. Andy's kind of like semi-retired. He's retired from, I guess, working professionally, but he still likes doing his own stuff. And his AIAJ album, let's get a plug to that, is pretty cool. I really do appreciate his work, and I really do like his latest, especially the Atmos mix. I'm very fond of it.
Yeah.
So Andy Jackson is another really stand-up guy.
Yeah, I hope we will have him on the show someday. So
Oh, that would be awesome. You got to get Andy Jackson on the
yeah,
show.
yeah, it would be lovely. So
Now that's a man that has stories.
yeah, I believe that. It was really great. I mean, we got much more. We would have much more to talk about, and we didn't even touch the harvested topic, all the great outputs you had there together with the guys, with the colleagues. Um,
Yeah, or the history with Great Dane Records as
yeah,
well.
yeah,
So
and
maybe
we
we'll
have to
maybe
do
maybe
another
we'll save
episode
that.
talking about
We'll
your
save that for a
career
future
there
date. Yeah. Yeah,
because
we'll see what
yeah,
the response is to this one. I hope I come off okay.
no, no,
I know that you asked me to do this a while back when you first started doing the
yeah,
podcast. You asked me, and I said no because I didn't want to come off like anyone of any importance at all. I mean, I know a lot of people think that I have some people get the impression that I have this huge ego and and I could see that from some of the forums, just from the written word, that I might come off not so much with an ego, but I'm opinionated. Let's put it
yeah.
that way. But I certainly didn't want to come off like I'm just a fan. I'm just a fan like everybody else and I've seen them since '77, so it's going on almost 50 years now. It's getting close to actually 50 years, 1975, from when I first discovered the band.
And you never got
So
tired.
I'm just I'm an enthusiastic fan.
Yeah,
I love meeting other fans, and I really do try to respect everybody out there. And I hope this was informative and
it
entertaining
was lovely. It was
to
great,
those
really. And
who
the
watch and listen to the podcast. I love what you're doing.
oh, great. Thank you.
This is really this is I'm a big fan, Nils. I have some catching up to do on some of the previous podcasts, but thank you for doing this. I think this is a great idea.
Thank you very much for being here. And we will have another episode and we talk about your bootleg or rodeo career besides Great Dane and Harvest and everything. I'm really looking forward to that. And thank you very much for being here. It was great. And thank you all listeners very much for listening. And please do not forget to subscribe to the Fingles Cave podcast, not to miss any upcoming episode. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ron. Bye.